All right, today we're going to unpack the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBA. And look, this isn't just about the numbers on a page. This is really about a core philosophy, a specific idea of how government should or shouldn't work. So let's get into what's really driving it. You know, everything about the OBBA really boils down to this one pretty provocative phrase: low taxes, minimal transfers, and a sink or swim approach. That's it. That's the core idea we're going to explore today, the belief system that shapes every single policy in this act.
So here's how we'll break it all down. First, we'll dig into that sink or swim philosophy. Then we'll look at the two main pillars that hold it up: less government and fewer handouts. After that, we're going to examine a major philosophical critique of this approach, and finally, explore what the potential long-term outcome could be.
Okay, let's dive right in with that foundational belief system, the sink or swim philosophy.
At the very heart of the OBBA is this principle called laissez-faire. It's a French term, and it pretty much means let it be. The core idea here is that the economy and society as a whole just works better when the government takes a big step back and interferes as little as possible.
Okay, so that brings us to the first big pillar: less government. This is where that philosophy gets turned into actual policy, mainly through tax cuts and deregulation.
First up, the OBBBA made some pretty key business tax cuts permanent. Now, things like full expensing might sound technical, but it just means businesses can immediately write off the entire cost of new equipment or research. The goal, of course, is to get them to spend more, to invest and grow, based on the idea that these benefits will eventually trickle down to everyone else through more jobs and better wages.
But, you know, less government means more than just cutting taxes. It's also about a wider federal pullback. The thinking here is that Washington should get out of the business of managing big national issues, like the environment or public health. A perfect example from our source material is the repeal of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. That's a really clear signal of dialing back federal involvement in things like clean energy.
And if you want a really stark example of this deregulation in action, look at this. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was set up specifically to protect consumers, had its funding cap cut by nearly 50%. That's a massive reduction, and it's a very direct move to weaken a major regulatory body.
And that leads us right into the second pillar: fewer handouts. This is where that sink or swim idea really gets put into practice, especially when it comes to the social safety net.
Let's take the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, for example. The age that able-bodied adults without kids are required to work was raised, well, it was raised dramatically. It went from 49 all the way up to 65. That is a huge change in who qualifies for food assistance.
And the changes definitely don't stop there. Take a look at what happened with Medicaid, another cornerstone at the safety net. It saw a 12% reduction in spending. We're not talking about minor tweaks here. A 12% cut is a substantial rollback for a program that millions of people rely on.
So what's the actual real-world impact of all this? Well, our source material points out that these cuts can create immediate hardship, especially for the most vulnerable people. Think about it. When there's an economic disruption, like jobs getting displaced by new technology, workers in rural areas are suddenly left with a much thinner safety net to fall back on.
Now, of course, not everyone is on board with this philosophy. The source material brings in a really powerful counterargument, and it uses the framework of a philosopher named John Rawls to critique the OBBA's whole idea of justice.
The whole critique really hinges on this idea called the difference principle. It's a fascinating concept. It basically says that having inequality in a society isn't automatically a bad thing, but, and this is the important part, it's only fair if the whole system is designed to give the biggest possible benefit to the people at the very bottom.
And the direct conclusion from the source is that the OBBA, with its whole package of policies, arguably violates this very principle. Why? Because by cutting taxes for the highest earners, while at the same time reducing benefits for the poorest, the critique says it completely fails this fundamental test of justice.
So why doesn't that trickle-down theory hold up under this critique? Well, the argument is that even if business tax cuts create new jobs, there's a huge mismatch. The new jobs are often high-skill, tech-focused roles in big cities. That makes them basically inaccessible, both geographically and professionally, for less skilled workers in rural areas. So instead of closing the gap, this could actually make that economic divide even wider.
Which brings us to our final section, where we look at the potential long-term outcome. What kind of society could these policies ultimately create?
The source material paints a pretty sobering picture here. The risk, it suggests, is the creation of an entrenched two-class society.
You'd have one class, a wealthy, thriving minority, probably clustered in cities, and then a disenfranchised majority pretty much everywhere else. That's the ultimate worry that this critique raises.
And that really leaves us with this massive, fundamental question. The OBBBA puts all its weight on one side of the scale: economic growth through these laissez-faire ideas. The critique, on the other hand, emphasizes the other side: social stability and justice for the least well-off. So the question we all have to think about is, how do you find the right balance?